Chapter 11. You know, welcome to aboard the Relativity would generally suggest one act a bit more welcoming. The doctor was seated in a cold, uncomfortable metal chair in front of an equally cold-looking table in a small room 2 decks below the bridge. The walls were featureless, smooth, white, and though there were no visible cameras or sensors, the doctor knew he was likely being watched. A pair of security guards flanked the only exit, and just across the table, Captain Duquesne sat in what looked like a far more comfortable chair, his head tilted slightly. "Well, you'll have to excuse the accommodations," Duquesne replied, frowning slightly as he considered the sonic screwdriver in his hand. Security had removed it from the doctor after a brief search. The device far easier to find given the form-fitting, outdated Starfleet science officer uniform he still wore. But considering what we've learned about you, it was decided that we could take no risks. "Ah, read up on me, have ya?" the doctor said, brow lifting and looking a bit smug. "Interesting tale?" "Yes, a very, very interesting and entertaining tale." Something about the emphasis on that last word drew a bit of curiosity from the Time Lord, but Duquesne didn't seem inclined to elaborate just yet. How'd you lot track me, anyway? Does Picard know about this?" "Oh, we're over 500 years from Picard," Duquesne replied. "And for what it's worth, he didn't betray you, at least not consciously. A personal log he made 3 weeks after your initial encounter. Just happened to mention that you told him that you were going to search for another Enterprise. Slip of the tongue, really, but that log, along with the hundreds of others from the Enterprise crew, became public domain about 50 years after Picard's death. Our analysts happened to link the mention to a very brief, cryptic report made by Commander Spock of the original Enterprise, mentioning he had been visited by a John Smith. I don't suppose that's your real name?" "No," the doctor replied, waving his hand slightly. "Just a quick little alias to get me around without raising too many questions." "What is it, then?" Duquesne leaned forward in his seat, looking far less friendly. "Your name, I mean." "Well, you can just call me the doctor." The captain smiled humorously. "No, seriously. I think we can be just a bit honest here, one time traveler to another. We both know you're not the doctor." The doctor's brow furrowed just a little, his own amusement replaced with just a little bit of confusion. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand. Thought you said you did your research." "Oh, I have," Duquesne replied. "Not just myself. Learning more about the time traveler called only the Doctor was actually a prime goal for the Temporal Agency upon its inception. Finding you, learning more about you, your methods, your technology, your impact on our history. Ever since your escape from Picard's Enterprise, Starfleet has had a perpetual interest in you, but one that is rather difficult to tend to, given time travel mechanics at the time were quite clumsy and somewhat inaccurate. We didn't have the means to observe or investigate without risking contamination of the timeline. So as soon as we did, rest assured, we threw all available resources into it. I personally went on several fact-finding missions in my younger years." "Oh, good for you, Bunch," the doctor replied. Though his tone was jovial, he admittedly was a little bit more cautious. "And what did you learn on your book report?" Duquesne climbed to his feet and began to pace the room, quite casually, hands folding behind his back. "As you know," the captain began, "there are numerous stories of a doctor across 100 different worlds, most of them just snippets, little more than myths and legends, but they're there. What's also on file are the historical records you were examining, detailing incidents where some mysterious man saves the day. And I'll confess, when our own analysts looked into them 20 years ago, there were signs of possible involvement from a higher alien intelligence. It was then that our directive was made, a simple mission, to find the doctor and bring him in for open discussion. So we went back," he continued, "further and further to each incident we found on record, each hint that the doctor had been there for a visit. Each time our operatives found nothing. No dilemma, no danger, and certainly no time-hopping hero coming to save the day. Reports that were filed, stories that were told on hundreds of worlds seems to have simply come from nowhere. Rumors. We never met anyone matching your description, or really anyone who seems atypical for the population, even when we went to the specific time and place of a reported incident. You're the first encounter with any such doctor we've had, though I assure you, we devoted a lot of time in finding you. Well, the doctor replied, a small smirk hiding his growing unease, you certainly don't think that you'll be able to simply nab me, do you? Lifting a brow, Duquesne didn't respond, simply gesturing to the Time Lord seated in front of him. That doesn't count! The doctor scoffed, arms crossed over his chest. I'm rather out of my element here. If this were my universe, I'd be running temporal circles around you lot, and probably be stealing your lunch money as well. For lunch! In any case, I don't see what this has got to do with anything. What I'm saying, Duquesne replied calmly, is that there is no doctor. No Time Lords, no Gallifreyan technology, or any of these other things you spoke of during your visit to the Enterprise. These are stories, yes. Legends and tales, and as far as I said, even reports that were supposedly historical in nature. But we've examined hundreds of them, and haven't found any evidence that they ever happened. Not on Earth, not anywhere. So would you like to hear my theory? Not particularly. My theory, the captain continued, ignoring the doctor's snide comment, is that you're not who you claim that you are. You're just some unusually clever fellow with a time machine who decided to pay a visit to a 24th century ship and dazzle them with your brilliance. You found stories on a handful of planets of this doctor figure and decided to adapt your persona as your own. The Enterprise D crew did describe you as incredibly advanced, but I think in this time frame, here and now, you're nothing too special. Is your ship bigger on the inside than the outside? The doctor continued, brow lifted. Duquesne smiled a little at that, but he didn't seem convinced. They had holodeck technology even in the 24th century. Duquesne's hand spread slightly. The senses can be fooled quite easily. The mind, too. Everything Picard reported during his captivity could have been implanted memories. Your little stunt on the Outron star might be quite impressive, unless you knew what would happen in advance, and therefore had all the time you needed to devise a solution. We're not too thrilled with your interference there, either. It took quite a bit of effort to restore the timeline after you intruded into it. Restore the timeline? What do you... The doctor paused for a minute. Then his eyes widened just a little. You couldn't have. Rogue asteroid, Duquesne replied. Completely destroyed the colony 1 week later, before anyone could depart. Safer than trying to interfere with the Enterprise's and your initial rescue. Fortunately, corrections to that nature are assigned to different ships altogether. It's not a duty I would have savored. The doctor fell silent, eyes flittering from side to side, his jaw tightening and his entire body tensing almost painfully. So really, Duquesne continued, considering his pad, the only concrete feats that you've provided were to overcome a computer system that, by our standards, is antiquated, and time travel, which, as you can see, we can do as well. I suppose, if you could call it that, the doctor replied distractedly, drawing a deep breath as he tried to fall back on his humor. I mean, a 2-year-old careens around the living room and manages to avoid crashing into most of the furniture, and we call that walking. Very funny, Duquesne replied. Now who are you really? Haven't you been listening? The Time Lord gave him a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm the doctor. If you're going to stick to this lunatic fairy tale, then bridge to Captain Duquesne! Shifting stifling aside, Duquesne leaned back, head tilting upward slightly. Duquesne here, go ahead. Captain, Operative Manning has contacted us from the Kirk's Enterprise. He reports he cannot access the interior of the ship and is requesting instructions. Damn! Duquesne paused for just a moment. Can't we just beam the entire thing here? You can't seem to get a lock on it. Very strange readings coming from it, sir. Stand by. Keep temporal shielding up. Duquesne out. Fawkes in the hen house? The doctor asked with mock concern, brow lifted. Looks like, Duquesne said quietly. It seems you've left a mess back when we picked you up. Your ship is going to be discovered by the original Enterprise crew sooner or later. By now, as far as the timeline outside the ship's temporal shielding is concerned, they already have. Eventually, the Starfleet is going to find a way in, and that technology could advance the Federation beyond a point that it's ready to reach, to say nothing of the risk that if her enemies found a way to get it as well. So are you going to help us fix the mess you made of the timeline? The doctor laughed. Flat out, in Duquesne's face, his own face reddening with a forced mirth as the pair of security guards shifted restlessly, not exactly pleased with his reaction. Duquesne, for his part, just sat there, waiting for the outburst to subside, his arms crossed over his chest. "Oh, this is rich," the doctor contorted, leaning forward in his seat, eyes gleaming like chips of ice. "I didn't create the mess, you did! When you brought me here, you nits! I was just on my way out, perfectly prepared to meander on my merry way, with none the wiser aboard that ship except the two lads who were perfectly happy to let me meander merrily. Then you lot waylaid me and bring me into this entirely wrong time period, leaving the highly advanced and extremely mysterious TARDIS parked in their cargo bay. And now you're here, blaming me for it, with all the narrow-minded, self-centered egotism of—" "I think I get the point," Duquesne injected, lifting a hand. "I don't care!" The doctor's voice was a bellow as he leapt to his feet, and the pair of guards raised their phasers, holding their fire only at Duquesne's gesture. "I'm not done talking!" the doctor snapped, disgust curling at his lip. Your people will wipe out an entire colony, murder every last man, woman, and child on it for the sake of preserving the timeline, then manage to bugger it up yourselves. You accuse me of risking the integrity of your past, but if the human race has reached the point where it can cautiously, cravenly kill off its own people for some misplaced sense of temporal stagnation, then it seems your past could use some bloody tampering with more. Duquesne didn't respond. He didn't speak at all, but he didn't flinch at the doctor's anger, didn't get to his feet. He just watched the captive quietly, evenly, not thinking to explain himself or justify the actions of his people. After a long silence passed between them, he said a single word. "Done?" Scowling darkly, the doctor flopped back into his seat. "Quite." "All right," Duquesne said. What would it take to secure your help in getting your ship out of there?" "Retirement to the Enterprise would be the very good start," the doctor replied, head tilted. "I'm the only one who can access the TARDIS, and if you want to get in, you just have to bring me along for it." "I'm not about to fall for that," Duquesne replied, smirking a little. "And if you're as brilliant as you claim, then we both know you must have something planned for just this eventuality, a key under the mat, some sort of override. We can certainly negotiate it if there is, or you can spend a few months in the brig. The Relativity has enough supplies and power reserves to last years, even with temporal shielding raised." Time Lord squirmed in his seat a little, eyes slipping away from Duquesne. His thoughts were all but painted on his face. While on one hand, he probably would have liked nothing more than to punt the captain out of an airlock. On the other, he wasn't exactly thrilled with the prospect of spending too long in confinement. With each passing moment, the defiance in his shoulders seemed to subside, his head bowed lower and lower, the anger in his eyes cooling and turning into quiet consideration. "Fine." Head tilting, Duquesne leaned a little bit forward. "Sorry, what was that?" "Damn you, I said fine!" the doctor snapped, not meeting Duquesne's eyes. "There is a way." A slow smile spread across Duquesne's face, one of quiet satisfaction. "Tell me." "My sonic screwdriver." Frowning slightly, the captain lifted the mechanical wand slightly. "Yes, that," sighing a little, shoulders slumping, the Time Lord explained. "A while back I was stranded in the past without access to my TARDIS. Long story, you don't care. But the point is, I made sure to develop a recall link, which I, of course, included in my screwdriver. Much like anyone with a proper phone can call it from any time in any point in time, anyone with the proper frequency can summon it to any point in time. Well, that is how it's supposed to work anyway." "Supposed to?" "Well," the doctor sounded almost embarrassed. "There have been some issues with the sonic not quite having the range to reach the TARDIS from any more than 100 feet or 100 days. However, since you have a lad on the original Enterprise, it'd be a simple matter to match the sonic transmission through your comlink. The TARDIS, gorgeous thing that she is, has no such range issues, and would trace the transmission back to your ship and come here in a flash of brilliance." Duquesne considered the doctor for a long moment, as if he was trying to find some sign of deception, but the Time Lord didn't even meet his gaze. His eyes lowered and shoulders slumped. "All right," the captain finally said, nodding and offered him the screwdriver. "I'll open a channel. You can call your ship here." "Well, I have conditions. the doctor replied irritably, eyes narrowed as they flicked back up. The captain snorted slightly, hardly surprised. All right, tell me. From what I can see of you lot, came the muttered reply, you're utterly obsessed with keeping your timeline nice and tidy. Therefore, the less time travel is about, the better. And so you are better off if I'm not here, in this universe, and I assure you, I am trying very hard not to be here. That's the entire reason I'm scurrying about like this. So if I retrieve the TARDIS from the original Enterprise's time rhyme and bring it here, and if I color only in the lines you so dearly want to provide me, then I only ask that you help me find a way to return to my own reality. Your accumulated knowledge, resources, if we work together, the problem can rather handily vanish on its own. Duquesne's lips thinned as he considered it, fingers drumming on the desk for several long moments. And then he finally nodded. All right. I still think you're lying through your teeth about who you are, but I suppose the least I can do is give you a chance to prove yourself. Wonderful! The doctor hopped onto his feet, startling the guards as they into brandishing their phasers a bit more excitedly. Well, we need more room than this. To your bridge? Only a couple of minutes later, they stood on the Relativity's main bridge, the same place where the doctor had initially been brought on his arrival. At Duquesne's gesture, all the guards had been keeping an eye on the doctor moved away, shifting to form a semicircle about 10 feet away, standing between the Time Lord and the temporal transporter. Clearly the captain was half expecting the Time Lord to make a break for it, but the doctor's face had only resignation on it as he reached his hand out to the captain. Right. Hand it over. You do realize, Duquesne said quietly, keeping the screwdriver just out of reach, that if the lights are so much as flicker when you use this thing, or if you even twitch towards the temporal transporter, there are a half a dozen very big, very burly security guards ready to tackle you with the carpet. Same if the blue box appears and you reach for the door handle. Oh, don't be daft, the doctor replied, looking quite innocent as he reached out, politely snatching his device and examining it minutely to make sure it wasn't been scratched. You lot are so advanced and knowledgeable. After all, I'm sure you have nothing to worry about. Uh-huh. Sighing, Duquesne turned to one of his junior officers. Lieutenant Cale, open the channel to Operative Manning. Nodding, the young officer turned her attention to her console, tapping on the command sequence. Channel open. Operative, the captain said, glancing once more at the doctor. We're about to try something on our end. Keep an eye on the subject's ship. Alert us to any change. Aye, sir. Standing by. Duquesne once more glanced to the doctor, gesturing him to begin. All right, the Time Lord muttered, lifting his screwdriver and pointing it towards a spot midway between him and the security personnel. Plenty of room for the TARDIS. The device buzzed to life, the pitch rising higher and higher with each moment. I'm piggybacking your transmission, linking to the TARDIS, and uploading the recall sequence. Just give it a moment to compensate for temporal lag, and... Captain! The voice at the other end was mingled with the whirling of the TARDIS's departure. The subject ship appears to be fading away. I think it's working. Of course it is. Give it a few moments to reach us, Captain. I'll park it right on your front lawn. Duquesne, indeed the entire bridge crew, turned towards the spot the doctor had indicated, waiting quietly, patiently, and a grin did cross many of their faces when they heard the same whirling sound, this time on the bridge itself. But as the seconds ticked by, there was no sign of the doctor's blue box, and indeed it didn't look like it would be materializing anytime soon. Turning to ask the doctor what was taking so long, Duquesne's words died in his throat as he realized the TARDIS was indeed materializing. More specifically, the TARDIS was materializing around the doctor. One of the security guards lunged, but even half-formed, the TARDIS's walls were solid enough to block the man's hands from getting at the Time Lord. Just before the TARDIS materialized completely, the doctor lifted up his hands to wave goodbye, and smirking and mouthing just two words. I lied. A split second later, he vanished from sight, leaving only the imposing blue box in its place. Two of the security guards hurled against the door, pushing and pulling, throwing themselves against it, and when that failed, stepped back and drawing their phasers, setting them to maximum. Taking up firing positions, they dropped to one knee and lifted their weapons, fully intent to blast their way inside. No! Duquesne shouted, stopping the guards in their tracks. We can't risk firing a high-intensity phaser blast this close to the temporal transporter. One stray shot could blow half the ship apart. Try to penetrate the interior with sensors instead. Compensate for the spatial distortions and get me a set of coordinates. We'll have a boarding party aboard before this bastard runs for it and... Captain! Lieutenant Kale, now her voice alarmed and more than a little incredulous. He's bypassing our security encryptions and getting into our system. Our databanks are being downloaded. I'm attempting to lock him out, but nothing seems to be... Damn it! Duquesne dropped his original thought, paling as he moved to hunch over her console, fingers dancing across the console. Start a complete systems reboot. See if that slows him down. And dump all unnecessary files. Full burn procedure. Trying, sir, but no response on And then suddenly, every monitor on the deck throughout the ship, including those in the brig, flickered and shut off their various analysis and displays. Instead, they showed 2 more words. Nothing special. Duquesne's jaw dropped. Son of a... The power went out. Lighting, computer monitors, propulsion, everything except for life support shut down all at once. The normal background hum of the relativity's operating systems faded into an unnerving silence. There was a brief scuffle as crew members throughout it moved to find flashlights and tricorders. And then on the bridge, a whirling howl as the TARDIS's time rotor began to operate again, breaking the darkness with a pulsing, ghostly light atop the blue box as each flash caused it to fade more and more. Within moments, it was gone, leaving a handful of very confused, very angry Starfleet officers behind.